So hey all. So for this signal video, I mean, I know that the first two were kind of, me talking about, bills that concern me, and these things are important, but it's also, I know that a lot of these topics are probably being addressed by people that speak more eloquently and or have larger audiences than I do. But in addition to also talking about, my stance on certain issues, what I think in general, I kind of want some of these signal videos also to be optimistic and uplifting. And, because that's me too. It's like the whole point of these signal videos rather than like vlogs and stuff. I mean, obviously sometimes in vlogs I'll talk about something that interests me or a topic or whatnot, but I want these signal videos to be specifically about things that, that are important to me, that matter to me, and or just give you a picture of who I am. Because, I'm sure there's a lot of people doing out there doing good work. And what I want to talk about in this particular video is the importance of stories, the importance of ideas, the importance of, the value of art. In particular, it's like I'm going to refer to, a couple of things in a different areas, but, you know, uh, I mean, no matter how you slice it, media, the stories that we see influence how we interact with the world, how we sets our expectations, and for example, when you see Lieutenant Uhura on the bridge of the Enterprise in 1966, 1967, you start to see that there's a place for people like her in the future, and it's one of the more famous examples because it really just opened people up to the possibility. And one of the things that I know I've spoken about this before, that sci-fi in particular has the ability to do is that it bypasses the part of your brain that might make you resistant to such things, and you just kind of think about the idea, and it opens you to things because you see it in a science fiction lens rather than in the preconceptions that you may already have. I've been reading Nana Visitor's book, Open a Channel, and it reminds me a lot of the power of some of these characters in Star Trek that may not necessarily um, seem like anything at the time, but when in hindsight and when analyzed, it's like you start to realize these changes that they introduce into us without even necessarily us knowing it. And it's like when Nana Visitor first read for the role of Major Kira, she initially thought that the character was written for a man because the character was assertive and argumentative at times, and she had her own opinions. And it was also the fact that, at least at the time anyway, a lot of characters were somebody's wife or somebody's girlfriend, and we hadn't really seen too many characters that were able to express the full range of emotions, and with especially among female leads, that this was usually just not something that was seen all that often. And particularly in the case of Major Kira, it was one of those benefits that being an alien, being a Bajoran, kind of allowed them to free her from a lot of the normal restrictions that would have been applied to a character of that type. And I also, for a long time, was noting that out of the first four Star Trek series, she was the first second in command that was a woman. And I really, I always liked her character. It's like originally they had wanted to get Michelle Forbes, but she had chosen to focus on a movie career, and as a result, we received Major Kira. And in all things, as interesting as it would have been to have seen Ro Laren on the halls of Deep Space Nine, I think it really ended up being to its benefit because Kira just provided so many opportunities. By being somebody that was a local, being somebody that was able to provide a non-Starfleet perspective, that was able to challenge Cisco in ways that a Starfleet first officer never would have. And I mean, particularly with Kira, it points out to me the value of having dissenting opinions, having perspectives that don't necessarily align with your worldview or your perspective, because you know you need people that will see things differently than you do, because they will help you see things that you would never see. not through any fault of your own, but just things you would just dismiss or just never even consider just because of the background that you come from. So, this is why I think it benefits, most people to have different kinds of folks around them because you'll have different points of view. Now, you don't necessarily have to take all of the advice, but it's important to have it. And, with the character of Captain Janeway, with the first female lead of a Star Trek series, it's like she starts to, her leadership style and her capabilities just kind of, raise the bar, I think, for a lot of young girls and women as to what they could accomplish in the world. And, I really kind of think that that's important, just, in this current age where we have so many limitations placed on us by ourselves, by society, by people that want to stand in your way, and it's just like, what really makes a difference, and especially it's just one of those things like, we limit ourselves in so many ways, and what really matters with a lot of these characters, with a lot of these stories, is when you see somebody that does something that you never thought possible, all of a sudden your mind is open to the possibilities. And that's really what I think we need to do with people, with young people, with our children today. Open their minds up to possibilities. Don't ever hold them back, at least as far as, seeing the possibility of what they can accomplish. I mean, like everybody, we have to grow up, we have to make our own mistakes, and it's going to take a while for anything, a lot of meaningful changes to happen. It might, I mean, but what matters though is that, and this is something I realized a long time ago, is that if you realize that something's a possibility, then you start to consider it. And it's like if you think that something's not a possibility, then it never even factors into your awareness. And I'm going to give you an example from my own life because I had seen this Celine Dion show on DVD. Some of y'all might know I'm a huge Celine Dion fan. And, I had seen this Vegas show that she did. And I don't know why, but for some reason it never occurred to me until I realized I could go see this show anytime I want. Or a show like it. It's like all it takes is money. I just have to buy a plane ticket, go get a hotel room, and go see the show. And it suddenly just opened my mind up to this possibility that I was stunned to think I had never considered it because, by the time we went, her original residency had ended, and that was why it was, we only were able to see it on this Blu-ray, and then we were able to see another concert in person. I fortunately had the privilege of being able to see Celine 3 times in concert because I'm just that big of a fan. And it was just one of those things that, at least at the time, when I had considered that it was that I could, this is something that I can do, that all it takes is money. And I was open to the possibility that I had never considered before. And, there's another example is that when we had purchased an outdoor freezer, to expand our capability for food storage, we decided to put it in the garage. And it's funny, Strag and I will tell you the story. But we had put food outside and, we would store it. And a lot of the times, because it was either raining or cold or something, we wouldn't want to go out, lift up the garage door, take a flashlight and sort through the freezer and decide, what was in there and what we wanted to bring in for dinner. And one day I was walking out on my way to work and I looked to my left and there's all of this junk in the utility room where the washer and dryer are. And I was like, why don't we put the freezer here? And, it's just an innocuous thought. So I went to work and, I usually look at Strag as kind of my second opinion on a lot of things. I'll have an idea and it's like, it seems like a great idea at first. And then it's just like, so I'll ask him. And if there's a problem with it, usually he'll be the one to spot it. So, I went to work, I sent him an email from my desk and I was like, is there any reason why we don't put the freezer in the utility room? Why don't we put all this junk that we never use out in the garage and put the freezer right outside the kitchen door where we have power and we have light and we can just sort of keep it inside the house but not totally. And it was like for the both of us, it was glass shattering because it was just like, why had we never done this before? And it was like a year and a half of us going through like mental gymnastics to try and avoid going out to the garage to get something from the freezer because if it was a particularly nasty day, and all of a sudden we had something that eliminated that problem completely, and it was just like, why had we not thought to do this when we first got it? But for a year and a half, that idea did not pop into our heads, and so was never considered. The possibility was never until I just had that errant thought. And so, it's like I encourage people to keep their mind open, it's why I love stories. And I know I've said this before, but it really makes a difference. It's like you see, when I've read, Royce Day's work, it's like I was always convinced that nobles were just something, they were just people that were, born into privilege and just not, really any good for pretty much anything, I guess. And then I started reading the Red Vixen Adventures series, and it started to turn me around on that there are nobles that are not, complete wastes of skin, that there are that I guess with any group, there's good people there. So it really changed my opinion on foxes, which I hadn't really been a huge fan of, mostly just because of their ubiquitousness, I guess, because they were for a long time like a super popular race in the fandom, and maybe they still are. But it was just the fact that they were everywhere, and it was just kind of one of those things that kind of turned me off towards these kinds of characters. And reading his series had kind of made me open once more to foxes, to nobles, and to other such things. And another example I want to give about I guess about a few things is that there's I know we all have first impressions, right? And I remember seeing a series called Battlestar Galactica, and I was preset to just not even pay attention to it because I'd seen the original and it did not impress me. And when I actually saw some of the original episodes, it just was not all that impressive. I mean, it was a decent series for the 1970s sci-fi, don't get me wrong, but it just didn't have the compelling hook that I was looking for. But with the new Battlestar, it's like I actually, my partner made me sit down and watch it, and it was just so amazingly good. And it's like I am just thrilled that he did, because it became one of my favorite non-Star Trek sci-fis. And last year in October, I went to by myself to go meet the cast and get autographs and so on. And it's like that never would have happened if I hadn't opened myself up to the possibility of giving this series a second shot. I mean, there's some of my favorite shows are ones that I did not like the first time, or it didn't catch me. Maybe not necessarily even that I didn't like them. It's like I watched 12 Monkeys, and the first couple of seasons, I mean, they were good. But when I binge watched the fourth season, I started really appreciating how good that series was. And then I started watching the whole series by itself, and it was just amazing, the difference it made to my mind, to my mentality. And, I also want to say, like, Lost in Space. I watched Lost in Space on Netflix. I mean, it was a good series, but I saw, the first time I saw it, like, I saw each season kind of in isolation and over bits of time. And then when I saw the third season and I went back and marathoned the whole series, it's like I remember being impressed at just how well all the pieces fit and what a good story it was. And it made such a difference to me as far as, seeing this series. And it is, again, one of my favorite non-Star Trek sci-fis. It's like right up there with Battlestar and Babylon 5. It's really good. And it's these series, these performances, these stories are ones I love watching over and over again. And it's all series that I might not have if I had gone on my first impression. So, I mean, I think that of course, that kids, I think that kids should be allowed to, for the most part, make up their own minds. I mean, there's a lot of things that I know that we want them to we want them to be safe, that we want them to be happy and such, and there may be other considerations for, and everybody's, of course, got their own ideas about parenting. But I kind of think that, ideas themselves are rarely harmful. Um, at least, it's like, I really want to be the kind of person that's, is open to things, that promotes openness. It's like just, be be open to the possibilities of things beyond what you expect as the field of normality, because there's so much in my life that if I had just sat inside my box and just been happy there and never tried to get out of it, that I would not have experienced. It's like I have been to at this point, I guess 5 Star Trek conventions. I have met a lot of the actors. I've gotten autographs, and it's like all of this never would have been an option if I hadn't thought, you know what, I can do this. And all it takes is just planning and effort and a little bit of thought. And, there are people that, are going to tell you that you can't or that you shouldn't or something. But it's just like the keeping yourself. I mean, maybe it's one of those things where we do these things to keep ourselves safe, but by opening ourselves up to possibilities outside of our experience, we can expand to heights that we never could have reached otherwise. Um, it's like there's always been, firsts for things. First woman in space. First black president. It's like there are all kinds of things that until they happen, they're not possibilities, but once they do, the door is open, and it's up to the rest of us to keep going through it, because these things are important. The possibilities that it's like women and girls can be scientists, they can be engineers, they can have careers in math, and it's like, and people, you don't have to be locked into the way that things traditionally are. It's just like there's a lot of ways that you know that we just expect things to be, and it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. And it's just like open, keep your mind, keep your heart open, and just be aware of the possibilities. Just look at things a little differently sometimes. Challenge your preconceptions. Check your ideas to make sure that they're not, that they are still things worth maintaining. It's like I've had a lot of impressions over the years that when I ask myself why I hold these impressions, it just kind of makes me want to be a better person, because I always try to self-improve. And I suppose it's one of the reasons why I really have always been a fan of Star Trek. It's like I've always been an appreciator of any of those stories where different groups of people work together as equals towards a common goal, or just allow themselves to be exposed to different possibilities. It's like we're gonna make mistakes, we're human, but this is the point is to be able to learn from them and to just sort of expand our horizons. So I encourage you, if you're watching this video, to just expose yourself to something different every now and then. Expose yourself to consider how some of the stories you've read have influenced you. What possibilities have they opened to you? What parts of your life are in existence because you opened yourself to these possibilities? It's like, don't ever limit yourself to what you think is the upper limit. There's always higher places to reach.
If you like werewolves, check out my book Blue Moon, available in paperback and ebook on Amazon. Thanks for watching. If you liked it, click the subscribe button and leave a comment below. See you next time.